Enda McGinley, the Antrim manager, three-time All-Ireland winner with Tyrone, is with us to help preview the game. Enda, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Ger. I'm good.
So, what's your general sense of how well Tyrone are in the build-up to this match, and how well they're going to be able to acquit themselves this weekend?
Yeah, going from the sort of the vibe you're getting, I think they're delighted that everybody's back. I don't think they expected to have everybody back, but that's how it's looking at the minute. I think they are that wee bit nervous that another case will come up, or there's other things just around the corner, because I suppose what has happened has sort of shook their confidence that you never really know what's around the corner. But I think as a squad, they're delighted that they're here. There will be, they're not saying it, but I think deep down there has to be a wee bit of apprehension among those that have been maybe more heavily affected by it in terms of their energy levels and how they're going to come through a game at this level. But at the same stage, I suppose, like we've all been saying for a long time now, anything that you're getting with COVID is a bonus. And for Tyrone, they're in a wee bit of bonus territory. The pressure's off them a wee bit. But I think within the squad, they want a chance to repay the favour. Well, not repay the favour, but at least do themselves justice to what happened in Killarney or earlier in the year. I think that has left a bit of a scar within the group.
It's so, I think maybe after the game is over and they tell us about which players were suffering and who had the impact of it and who didn't have the impact. It's impossible for us previewing the game to fully do justice to it, because all things being equal, if Tyrone were fully fit and there had been no COVID in the camp, I'm not saying it's a 50-50 game, but it's pretty close to it. Like, certainly the dynamic runners that Tyrone have, the energy they have, the new style of play they have, the age profile of the team, the experience of the team, they would be right there with Kerry, I think, particularly given that there are so many doubts about Kerry, flaky in last year's championship, sensational championship the year before. There would be huge imponderables, but as it is, the bookies have Kerry 7-1 on, and it's hard to argue with that, but at the same time, it doesn't make any sense. Apart from COVID.
I didn't realise it was as much as 7-1 on. Like that's exceptionally strong, to be honest. From a Tyrone point of view, every now and then you'd be sort of playing devil's advocate and be saying, "Geez, is there much chance for us at all down here, given what happened earlier in the year?" And pretty much everybody is saying, "Here, you never know." And I think there's a quiet confidence that the team can put in a real performance. Like the whole COVID thing, there's as long as the players haven't been very adversely affected, and I'd be hoping that is the case, there's a real sense there of a circling of the wagons. I think the team as a group of players will see what that new management team, how they handled a really, really difficult situation. They came out really strongly with a team first, player first approach. They were prepared to pull out, although I suppose some people would be saying they were just playing a good hand of poker. But from a management team point of view, they acquitted themselves brilliantly, really, really astutely. The players will have gained confidence from that. The fact that the management put the players first, and the players will be looking forward to this massively. They will know that it is a shot to nothing to a certain extent. Mayo and Kerry both are, for want of, or using the cliche that we're all using now in terms of further along that development pathway. But at the same stage, Tyrone, I think in the players that have been coming back, to form, I think they'll know that they can give Kerry a game. I think the balance of the team, I think the defensive quality that they've shown earlier this year, I think they know that, yes, Kerry, of course, is going to pose a test, maybe like no other team in the country can pose a test in terms of your defensive strength. But that's a test I think Tyrone will feel that they'll want to take on. And I certainly wouldn't be thinking that there's too many in the Tyrone camp are thinking that they're rank outsiders here.
How good are Tyrone as a county at utilising something like this to create a greater energy on the day, to create a siege mentality, particularly from the perspective of Brian Dooher as somebody who you know very well? Because it does seem that from what Niall Morgan is saying over the last couple of days, he's like, it's the most embarrassed I've ever been after a game with regards to the league match. It really feels like they've gone quite hard on themselves after that. They've been almost quite open about the impact that the COVID situation will have on them. That privately, are they harnessing that in a positive manner, in a way that says, lads, we're waiting in the long grass here?
Absolutely. Look, I think any GA team loves a good chip on the shoulder. I think that is the motivation 101 for GA teams, and Tyrone's certainly no stranger to that end of things. So any chip on the shoulder at all just gives you that wee bit more of an edge. And for me, there's nothing wrong with that. Sports psychologists might say that's a negative energy and eventually it peters out. But every now and then for the certain games, it's absolutely great. And Tyrone do have that advantage. It's really difficult for Kerry coming into this game, knowing that they absolutely hammered, like it really did embarrass Tyrone, and quite rightly so down in Killarney. Tyrone were miles off the pace. They did not perform like a county team. The old, again, going back to the cliches of modern sport in terms of the standards that teams set themselves, and they have to live up to them standards, and all of this sort of chat is the talk of any of any county team at the minute. Tyrone will know that they let themselves down badly in Killarney. I think it was put in fairly straight ways to them in the video analysis session following that, particularly by Brian Dooher. And they'll be stung by that. There was a lot of personal criticism. The likes of Niall himself came out of that game personally. He had a bit of a nightmare that day. Like any player with any sense of what they're about will want to get out and go at that team again, and will not want to come out off the pitch in the same way. And you've got that across multiple players within Tyrone. As well as that, you've other players coming back, the likes of McShane coming back, who'll be ready to sort of really stand up. I think the extra couple of weeks will have helped him. Conor McKenna was really coming back on form. He had a really poor National League. He was carrying sort of an injury throughout the whole thing, and struggling. Only found out about the injury afterwards, and it suddenly made sense because I think he's got on top of it now, and he looked a better player, a much better player, just before during the Ulster campaign. So Tyrone will know that they're a different team completely than Killarney, and they'll know that Kerry were in their absolute pomp. And everybody now knows that this Kerry team, if you give them a chance to run at you, they are going to destroy you. But even Cork, even in that Munster final, like Cork in the first half and even a bit of the second half, whenever Cork were running at them, Kerry weren't world beaters either. So they're not a finished complete team just yet. They have talent, like just extraordinary talent really, but they have weaknesses too. And the Tyrone game plan, look, probably even from an energy level point of view, Tyrone will probably know they need to play this game a wee bit more conservatively. I think that suits when looking at the team that they're taking on. I think sitting a wee bit more compact, hitting on the break and then building yourself into the game, I think that suits both the Tyrone situation from a COVID point of view, but also for taking on Kerry, just to frustrate that Kerry forward line a wee bit more, and then look for the opportunities to put them on the back foot.
So what do Tyrone have in their armoury to exploit those Kerry weaknesses that you mentioned?
They've obviously got the running game that they are well versed, but they do have real attacking threat, particularly if the likes of Conor McKenna and Callum McShane, which looks to be the case, are fit for this game. You've Darren McCurry, who's in as good a vein of form as I've seen him, particularly, and this is the strange thing, he had a poor game against Donegal, and yet he really stuck at it and kept at it. And Darren McCurry, for too many game times, whenever the game was going well, he was the best forward in the pitch and he could really fly. But whenever the game was tougher and things just weren't rolling as well, sometimes he had much quieter games whenever the team needed him most. I thought during the Ulster campaign he showed a real maturity of the game, because there was times the game wasn't quite running for him, and yet he still got big scores, and that's what Tyrone needs for him. But in them three men, they've got real forward potential. They've obviously got a strong bench. They've shown that throughout the Ulster campaign. I think in their new midfield partnership, Con Kilpatrick, Brian Kennedy, they are very much learning the ropes at this stage. But they give a physical presence and a work rate there that I think will work nicely against Kerry. And particularly the big thing for me is the quality of their defensive performances. Padraig Hampshire, Ronan McNamee, brilliant. Michael McKiernan going really well. Michael O'Neill, centre half back, going really well. So from a Tyrone point of view, there is more players on form than maybe we've had in a wee while, and that gives you a really good place to be, particularly when you're coming into a game largely written off.
Totally written off. They're absolutely totally written off. Those prices for an All-Ireland semi-final, I can't remember anything like it for for an Ulster champion team who are Ulster champions, maybe Cavan, but that was a complete one-off. This is a team who we haven't even talked about the recovery of Matty Donnelly and the form that he's in. Like, I'd seen Matty Donnelly in a walking boot on crutches at a conference in Croke Park, I'd say two Januaries ago, and thought, Jesus, I really hope he manages to make it back, but never expected him to be back to the same level he was at before the injury. Like, that type of recovery, that type of performance he was able to put in the Ulster Championship is the type of thing that really makes the rest of the teammates sit up and go, something special is happening here.
And again, his form line is sort of reflects very much the team. Like, again, Tyrone didn't do, ironically enough, they stuck really tightly to the deadlines. They only give themselves 3-4 weeks of on-pitch work before the National League, and they were a wee bit off colour compared to other teams, and I think that showed. Then the personnel within that, some of them were struggling for form. They weren't quite clicking or hitting, certainly to their levels during the National League. But during the championship, like, Matty again didn't start brilliantly in the championship, but then he suddenly started to find his groove and become much more prominent. With that, like against the Donegal team, there was a literal feeling that the team threw off the shackles and suddenly discovered a confidence in themselves and a feeling as if they looked around themselves and said, lads, you know what, there's something here. There was the form of the boys on the pitch was starting to click. There was the quality of the men coming off the bench was really good. And suddenly it looked like a confident, serious team, and I had no doubt at all in terms of Ulster final come that stage. And then couple of weeks and what has happened since will have bonded that group together. They know it's far from ideal, but that sort of creates in adversity, there's always a chance to develop a bit of strength. And I think they'll have done that. I think they'll have grown in faith and confidence in terms of their new management team as well. So, look, without a doubt, they are up against it. Kerry are a phenomenal team. The quality of football they've played, I think it was working out. I think their average winning margin, if we take the Dublin game out of this year where they drew, their average winning margin is something like 11 or 12 points. Like, this team is sensational in terms of their quality up front. But Kerry know themselves that they haven't been fully tested this year in a real horrible game, and you do not win championships without coming through a horrible, tough game where things aren't quite flowing for you. It's up to Tyrone to bring that to them, and I think Tyrone can. I think they're in a position to. I think Tyrone, maybe the whole COVID thing could be a blessing too, because without it, Tyrone might have been coming in really right. Let's express ourselves, let's do all this. I think they know they have to maybe park that, and this is a game just to get down into the trenches and work and look. From what Limerick have done, from what Mayo have done, work rate and that heart and that desire carries you a massive length of a way in these big games. And I don't think Tyrone, COVID or not, I don't think Tyrone will be short of that come this weekend, and that for me gives them every chance.
We had Rory Beggan on the show yesterday and talking about the importance of Niall Morgan. Does the importance of Niall Morgan almost become greater given what you're talking about there and how shrewd they need to be with their energy? Like you mentioned Kennedy and Kilpatrick there, two lads you'd suspect who could give maybe perhaps even a less mobile Kerry midfield unit real problems off a long kick out.
Yeah, the whole kick-out scenario obviously is going to be massive. Kerry are bringing a few new tactics to the game as well on that front, and I think Tyrone will have had a good chance to sit down and watch that. So how Niall Morgan deals with that will be really interesting. For me, regarding Niall, it's just really key. There's a lot of chat obviously about him and Rory Beggan and the change that they're bringing to goalkeeping and the very much sort of the Ulster final, which became a crazy type game. But I think we need to be cautious in terms of that. And I think what happened in Killarney will Niall won't want a repeat of that. But I think certainly a goalkeeper that's involved in play, that's fine. But I think there is going to be a wee happy balance, and if they go too gung-ho, I'd imagine Kerry would have a wee plan for that. But in terms of the ability to break down Kerry's really heavy press on a kick-out where Shane Ryan comes up and even their full-back comes up too and leaving their forwards in behind, I think that's a key thing that Tyrone will have looked at. It will probably happen at some stage. It could be very effective, but at the same stage, I think it will be a really, really high risk strategy for Kerry, because if Tyrone are sitting looking at that, I'd imagine they'll have a plan in place, like the Donegal type method of punching a ball on when it's landing in midfield to men running towards the opponent's goals. If you've got the likes of those two midfielders, Matty Donnelly can come out, even Cathal McShane can follow his man out as well, and suddenly you have a big line of men across the middle that if that ball's going really, really long over that Kerry press, you can get right at that Kerry defence. And for me, if a team is really, really trying to do that high press, that is them threatening you. But I think you can answer that right back with a threat right to them. And I think Tyrone will have seen that, and I'd imagine will have a plan in place. But the whole kick-out scenario is going to be fascinating, as it always is in the modern game. And Niall, for me, he's been absolutely outstanding. For me, a lovely, boring, really, really solid goalkeeping performance would be perfect.
I was going to say, so you're not actually actively encouraging him to get over the halfway line, because Rory Beggan was like saying that it kind of came into play more for him in the last 10 minutes of a game where you're chasing it, but that the next iteration is straight from the get-go, first 10 minutes I'm going to be wandering up the field next year. That's what he expects to see.
Yeah, and it is possible. It does seem to open up a wealth of possibilities, because it is all about getting an overlap. Like it's so critical for teams now in terms of tracking of runners and not having that sort of overlap, because that just even one loose man, one overlap can really spring your defence open. And so there's a lot of work done in terms of tracking runners. But if you inevitably create an extra man out there, how do you deal with that? It is exceptionally difficult. I still just think there will be opportunities for the defensive team in that regard to create channels, to create sort of dead end alleys, to shut that down, and then to spring an even more effective counter attack when with the team so out of position. Like you usually want somebody holding at the back. And goalkeepers, a lot of the modern goalkeepers, particularly like Morgan, play a lot of outfield for the club, but at inter-county level, outfield play, you can be showing up at times. So there is still that risk, and they are massively important as communicators. Like a sweeper keeper might be a happy medium if the goalkeepers are intent on being involved, because they tend to be brilliant communicators, and that communication and the organisation of the defence and the seeing what's in front of you, you need somebody at home organising that. And being able to take that role. But if the goalkeeper's way up the pitch, it certainly leaves you a man down in that pretty important role.
One of the things we wanted to chat to you as well about, Enda, this morning, I'm not sure, did you read Kevin McStay yesterday talking about the macho culture that exists in the GAA. Machismo is the greatest stain on Gaelic games. It is deemed better for a Gaelic footballer to be an assassin or a thug than soft or windy, he said in the sub-headline of that Irish Times piece. Is that something that you've noticed throughout your playing days, throughout your management days to date, that there is that culture of machismo in GAA?
It's a contact. For me, it's a contact sport, and it's an aggressive contact sport, and when you're on the pitch, you're tested in every faculty. So we all know that if there's a really, really skillful young forward, he will get particular testing to see if the other aspects of his game, his courage, matches up to his skills. Now, if we want to address that as machismo, it's part of the sport. You have to measure up. Come a big game at county level for me, there was, by that stage, I suppose you've passed most of your tests or your questions, otherwise you wouldn't be that length. But there is a massive question mark on the courage of any player, both in dealing with their own demons and dealing with setbacks on the pitch, but in terms of physicality that opponent might give you as well. Now, for me, it never really made any sense, and it sort of always washed over me, that side of it. But some players are maybe a wee bit weaker in that regard, and they can be targeted. That's obviously, maybe it's not ideal, but it's part of the skill set of any player to be able to deal with those things. Is that the right way to be? It's probably not ideal. Just thinking off the top of my head, it's probably not ideal, but I think it's deeply ingrained in the sport that the sport itself is a physical. It's a physical sport. It's a physical test. It's a test of both your skill, your physicality, your courage, your ability to work hard to put your body through a level of work rate and an intensity of work rate that many others would question. I think when we see our best players, so around here, I suppose we always go to Peter Canavan, but why he gained so much respect was not because of his skill set, but because of the fight and the battle that he had. And he got tested more and more and more. And the fact that his mental health in that regard earned him a level of respect, I suppose. And I suppose so many of the cliches that we use in dressing rooms about who's the man that you would want in your trenches. When you're going into battle, that's the player that you have beside you. Like a lot of that's all about the manliness of it and the going to battle of it. And maybe we're a ancient sort of clan culture, and the clans used to do battle, and we don't do that nowadays. And maybe this is our form of, you're fighting for your territory, you're fighting for the pride in the jersey. And so when we talk about all of that, and all of that for me is good. You want that pride in the jersey. You're playing for where you're from. You're playing for your family. You're playing for your boys that you grew up with. Whenever you put that sense of pride on it and that sense of identity on it, then that other aspect, I think, is going to come into it. I absolutely detest the crap in the game, the sort of the unnecessary man-to-man sort of antagonism that is allowed and goes unpunished, the interference with men way off the ball. I would think we can easily iron that out of the game by bringing in an Aussie rules type thing where no physical contact is allowed unless you're actually contesting for a ball, or within that contest for a ball. Verbal's not there. We can stamp down harder on that. I hate any of that as much as I hate any diving or simulation. And I think some sort of a retrospective review of games and a pulling of boys that have feigned injury, feigned head injury. There's all of that sort of stuff I hate. And that's maybe the opposite side of the machismo. I think we've lost some of the machismo, some of the rule changes. We've lost on that, and I think the game has degraded a wee bit. So absolutely, I can see aspects of Kevin's point and would fully agree with it. But part of the game that I love, part of the championship, that spirit, that fight, all of that there, you can dress that up whatever way you want. But I think there is an idea of a competitive battle there, and I don't see how or why you would want to remove that from the game.
I think, in fairness to him, that the point that he's making is that it's the stuff, it is the off the ball stuff, it's the unnecessary violence that gets meted out off the ball, where somebody walked up to somebody and gets a punch instead of a handshake at the start. The rules of the game are actually, I know we criticise the lack of definition of the tackle, but the rules of the game allow a lot of physical contact, and that's why I think the sport is on the verge of a massive breakout over the next couple of years, because the defensive focus on the game has shifted. Teams are learning to attack more. We're not going to have one superpower dominating. We might have a championship structure that's fit for purpose. Every team might start the season with something that they're ready to win. It is those few bits that are left in the game where an elbow gets left in a tackle or a knee gets slid into a head. That's clearly, we all know that it's semi on purpose and you get away with it because of the rough and tumble. That it's those bits, it's the nastiness as opposed to the manliness. And it's where that bit, it's that grey area that exists that the sport kind of seems to tolerate. I would argue it's because we tolerate that in real life, that as a society we haven't exactly learned to clamp down on street violence. So, our sport is a product of who we are as a country.
No, and I agree with that. And look, yes, that there crap that happens off the ball. I don't see any part of that. I don't see that is in any way proving yourself as a big fella. A lot of the boys that are mouthing in that there, whenever push really comes to shove, I'm not too sure they're putting their hand first in the fire or standing up to the team. Some of the best players I had just weren't involved in that sort of stuff. So yes, the off the ball stuff, if there's anything can be done to clamp that out, absolutely, I would fully agree with you. I think the game is on the verge of a brilliant new era. I think some of the quality of the play, the fitness and the athleticism of the teams, the tactical noose that's now coming into the game. I think it is just sitting in a really, really healthy place. I would love to clean out some of the rules, the forward mark, the defensive mark, them type of things. I would tidy them up. I would clarify the black card and just let it be for a cynical foul rather than a specific definition of a cynical foul, that he has to be pulled down. Like any foul where you have any foul that's pretty much on purpose, that you have no realistic attempt to play a fair or a legal tackle, then that's a cynical foul as far as I'm concerned. Whether it suits some sort of definition of a ankle or a foot trip or a pull down rather than a push or something like that there, I think that's we're muddy in the waters. Cynical play is obvious, but equally that off the ball stuff, that physical contest, like if umpires, there's enough men around the pitch, if the umpires or linesmen see a player jostling and use their common sense and know which one's the aggressor. Too often we're at the 2 yellow card thing, where if 2 players are jostling, it ends up in a wrestling match. It's a 2 yellow card scenario. If you've got a star forward and you've got a defender that's in his face the whole time, it is the defender that's doing that. It is not the forward that's in the defender's face. So get the defender booked. If that defender's booked early, marking a star forward, you'll very quickly see that type of thing come out of the game, because it's too high risk for a defender to do that or to be caught doing that. So I think there is steps that could be taken to start tiring that out. Anything that could do that, brilliant. And then the other thing that needs to happen, in the John Small tackle obviously has brought it full into the limelight, is that rugby type approach, where because of the sheer physicality of our players now and the impacts that can be involved in our games, there needs to be training of players that they're responsible for their body. So whenever they're going into contact, they have to, the safety of their opponent has to be first and foremost. And if they can't guarantee that, they have to adjust their tackling accordingly and take in that rugby type scenario, that an accidental heavy hit, like I don't believe John Small he just went to make a really good hit. The opportunity was there. He went for missed time, and a really bad injury ensued. But in rugby, that would be a red card almost, because he, out of lack of control of his body, he caused the injury to the opponent. And I think because of the strength of our players now and the power involved in them hits, I think, but there's a whole level of training needs to come into that because that's a whole new approach.
So can Tyrone get David Clifford sent off again this weekend then?
I don't know, but certainly you'll be wanting to keep them quiet. But again, look, as to this weekend and all of them things, like this is a battle for Tyrone. There is no point them heading out to be a nice team. Nice teams don't win anything. Like that's always was kind of Peter's main mantra to us as young boys coming through, because he had been through them years too, that nice boys just didn't win anything. And him, probably from the abuse that he received over the years, he developed that hard and he hammered it down our throats time and time again. Nice boys don't win anything. So it's okay for us all outside the game to speculate and pontificate, if you want, about how the game should be played, or it should be entertaining, or it should be this lovely sportsmanship. The boys on the pitch have to play within the rules of the game, and whatever bendiness is within those rules, whatever flexibility is within those rules, whatever the referees allow on a given day, you play to that and you try and get the result. You try to win, and whatever it takes to win, you do that. And I think everybody, all supporters, all other teams, that's what you expect from your opponent. And I don't think Tyrone will be shy in that regard this weekend.
And brilliant stuff. Always great to talk to you. Thanks a million.
All the best, Chair.
It's Enda McGinley giving us some very interesting thoughts there about the game this weekend. Are you getting a bit nervous now? I haven't heard that.
Yeah, well, how could he not be?
I mean, come on. I was
How
like,
could he not be after listening to that?
oh yeah, he is playing really well. That's a good point. Actually, they're all excellent points.
Have the odds moved in yet?
Not yet, but by the end of the show,
Mr. Gilroy has put his house and entire family on Tyrone.
into the middle. 8:37 this morning here. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. We have a clip for you here from this week's edition of the Football Pod. It's episode 16. The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, riding high in the charts. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you rate, make sure you tell your mates about this. It is absolutely brilliant, and it's basically doubled its listenership since the very start of the season, and that's only going to continue to grow over the next couple of weeks. It's available on the OTB Sports app now exclusively, so get the OTB Sports app. That's your first listen. Turn on your notifications, and every time a new episode lands, we will ping you a little note for it, and you can just hit the button. You don't even have to do anything else. Just hit the button and it'll come on your earballs.